Hey everyone, my name's Ken Harlan, founder, CEO of MobileFuse. If you don't know what MobileFuse does, we're one of the largest programmatic in-app exchanges. Probably 1 out of every 10 ads you see, if you're using an app, is powered by us. We also have 325 clients that want more impactful creative. They want someone else to design it for them, traffic it for them, and we also recently added CTV. Amy. This is going to be awesome. So a lot of people are out here saying, wait, this should be all about retail, and you're from the USTA. So can you give a little bit about your background?
Yes, absolutely. So right now I'm at the USTA, which is the United States Tennis Association. I've been there for about 7 years. Prior to that, I was in retail for about 20 plus years. I'm not going to give you my age, but I'm sure you could do the math. So I was with everything from mass to luxury to niche to tween. So I have a deep passion for the space. And while tennis is a broader category, it does have a little retail within it as well. So I didn't go completely rogue. But I definitely changed verticals.
And you just recently changed roles at the USTA. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why that happened?
Yes. So like many organizations, the United States Tennis Association, we're a very matrixed organization. So what interested me about the job when they recruited me is there's 2 parts. One, there is community tennis, which is the mission of the organization, because we're the national governing body of tennis in America. And that is to grow participation. And on the other side is pro tennis. And we own and operate what I call the most spectacular event, which is the US Open, as well as represent the United States in pro tennis at the Olympics, as well as the Davis Cup and the Billie Jean King Cup, formerly known as the Fed Cup. So years and years ago, the organization was bifurcated. Then we centralized the marketing role, in which there was a chief marketing officer that oversaw both sides of the business, as well as the in-house agency in between. We recently decided about 6 months ago to have the marketing functions report into the business units to ensure more accountability, and then partner with the in-house team to execute upon their business objectives and KPIs. And I still, within that, have oversight over all content, creative, social media, merchandising, licensing, and obviously are accountable for the KPIs, but just with a little bit of a twist in the organizational structure.
So I don't have data on this, but I'm going to just use my own experience. I know more people that play tennis than ever, so sounds like you're doing well with your first goal, tennis for all, right? And then I've been going to the US Open for maybe, well, I don't want to give my age, but long time, right? And by the way, I love, like, my picture there is from when I was like 35, and I'm going to be 50 this year, so I'm a guilty one for given a different image. But anyway, so you have the US Open is incredible. I mean, I've been there for so long, and it just keeps evolving. It's always better. More people are attending than ever. That's at least, so if I'm wrong with those assumptions.
No, you're right with that.
Okay, good. Your retail experience, your background, and just in general, like, what do you, obviously being in your roles there for the last 6.5 years, you've had a big impact on the success of both of those. What are the things from your experience that you think's really helped you be successful and the USTA be successful?
That's a tough question. Since there's 2 parts of the organization, I'll take community tennis first. When the recruiter called me for the position, they were looking outside the tennis universe. It's a very insular kind of vertical. So they were interested to get a different perspective and bring someone up from the outside. They wanted to change the conversation they were having with consumers, both on a fan base perspective and the kind of conversion to participation. And they didn't have a lot of information and a lot of data on people. So what better to go into kind of retail, because retailers know so much about our consumer behaviors. Probably Facebook knows more because they make me buy something every night when I can't fall asleep. So they wanted to understand, how people are interacting. How do you get more, of them from an acquisition standpoint? How do you retain them? How do you upsell them from the US Open side into hospitality, into experiences, into suites, into better seats. So I really brought that kind of knowledge base from retail into the USTA. In addition, when I got there, we went on an overhaul of our digital properties. We kind of had a spaghetti kind of chart of different Excel sheets where all data was going. So we wanted to make sure that everything was funneling into kind of one holistic kind of view of the customer. In retail, one would call kind of an omni-channel, looking at brick and mortar as well as e-commerce. This is more who's playing tennis, who's going to the Open, how do those kind of universes kind of collide, how do you make the most of that data, how do you convert people going into the US Open, get rackets into their kids' hands so they can understand tennis and learn tennis. And lastly, I would say from a USTA standpoint, we knew a lot about the competitive tennis player. We didn't know a lot about the casual player, because we have USTA programs which, to become a USTA member, which we have 600,000, really the KPI on that is kind of growth, but it really is mostly about competitive play. You wouldn't join a USTA league unless you're really a 3.0 or above. We wanted to actually give services to entry-level adults and kids as well.
And one thing that I think is really cool and this is not going to be a marketing question or anything like that, the week before the US Open is a really, I think it's an experience that not many folks know about, but when they experience it, it's just unbelievable for, whether you're love to play tennis, you don't know how to play tennis. Can you tell everyone a little bit about that?
No, absolutely. We call it actually the best kept secret of the US Open. It used to be called Qualifying Week, and it's actually the fourth biggest tournament within the United States. We actually, in 2019, brought it and kind of rebranded it and expanded what it was, calling it Fan Week. And we market it as that. It's a free event. Anyone can come, and we kind of peppered it with some fantastic quality programming. We worked with our sponsors. For example, Chase does a concert. This year we had Joe Jonas and DNC, which was fantastic. We had a food event, which you could kind of taste all of the food at the Open. It was for charity, as well as meet a lot of the chefs, the celebrity chefs. We had one of the greatest things actually was the top players playing on Ash, and they were playing against each other and warming up. You can get in there for free, get up close and personal, and then we have our kind of tentpole event, which is Kids Day. We had Dude Perfect there. We gave away free rackets. We connected them to local programming to get their kids into programs. And we're really representing this as a kind of gateway for just new players to get into the game, but also new people from a fan base to become, ultimately ticket holders for future events.
Right. Yeah, that's an awesome week. So this is a pivotal time at the USTA, specifically for the US Open. For years and years, everyone knows, hey, it was Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, Serena Williams, right? You kind of knew, like, okay, and then you could use those stars, if you will, as the draw, right? But now the stars are either retired or they're not they're losing sometimes, right, to up-and-comers. So this is a pivotal time. Can you take us through a little bit about, because that's like almost like a change in product, if you will, or a change in star, a change in attraction. So how is the USTA embracing it? How are they marketing around it, right? I think it's really exciting, but I'm also like a tennis nerd. So, but how in general are you and the organization embracing that change?
Well, I think it's an amazing time for tennis. I don't think there's ever been a better time for tennis. Last year was our most successful U.S. Open on all accounts, from profit, attendance, impressions on social media, broadcast. I mean, I think it was the Serena effect a little, but Serena kind of broke the record with ESPN on the most watched tennis match ever. But when you kind of looked at the U.S. Open, and then when Serena kind of retired, it kept going. The momentum kept going, and you had wonderful stars like Carlos obviously winning the U.S. Open, Frances Tiafoe coming up and coming. All of these new names and these storylines. It's right now, pivotal is a great word. It's the changing of the guard. If you guys are watching the AO, which is incredibly hard to watch in the United States, but unfortunately, Rafa actually just bowed out with an injury. I mean, he lost the match, but he lost the match basically because of an injury. To an up and comer. It's naturally going to happen. We've been waiting for this time. It's on the men's side, it's always been Rafa and Novak and Federer and that race to who's going to beat it. Now, that's not the conversation anymore. The conversation are who's next, these newcomers, these new names, like Tiafoe, like, Alcaraz, like Sinner. I was just talking to someone earlier about Breakpoint, which is the new Netflix series of the people that did Formula One. And it's, peppered with all these new players. And people are hungry to understand, their stories, how they, were brought up in the tennis world. So I think there's no better time now. I would also say that from an American tennis standpoint, we're rocking it. We have Tiafoe, we have Coco, we have Sloane Stephens, we have Taylor Fritz. We have the more tennis top players now than we've had in years.
So to show you what a tennis nerd I am and tennis fan, so my wife and I, like I said, we've been going for years and years. Our favorite thing's to go on the side courts and not into the main event. And we always know, usually the parents sit on one side or the other, on the extreme side, and we'd like to sit a couple rows behind them. And it's among, like, everyone you just mentioned. And to see the emotion that comes from, like, the parents and the friends, like, that's like a whole nother experience. So might sound a little like stalking, so don't hold it against me. I'm not like that. But, I mean, there are so many different flavors and ways you could experience the U.S. Open. And I agree. This is a really, really exciting time. Okay, before you mention, you touched on e-commerce, merchandising. Can you tell us a little bit more about the strategy there that you've implemented?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have usopen.org, which has our US Open merchandise. We are looking to expand the selling window we've been doing it for years, but we're continuing to invest in that. So to expand it into holiday shopping, as well as look at a private label to expand the brand. For the 50th anniversary a couple years ago, we actually changed the logo. It was a fantastic project that we work on. And we're looking to see, can US Open and the new Flaming Ball kind of be bifurcated a little? Can we play with that kind of logo to put out a more high-end product? We're working on kind of fixing the challenge of international shipping, which most retailers are having challenges with, because right now it costs probably the same to buy a product as to ship it, which is not a winning formula for anyone. So that's on the e-commerce side. On the commerce side, which is the 3-week window on our at our tournament, we've kind of looked at our collection, and now we have multiple different stores. We have a high-end collection, which is on our club levels. We have our huge store, which is in our Louis Armstrong, and then we have different satellites, which are kind of the staples, our array of hats, and, other kind of merchandise. And then we've been, working very hard with our third-party vendors, of the likes of, Ralph Lauren, who is a sponsor and a partner of us. They've done great things with personalization, and they're going to expand their footprint for the 23 tournament. Fila's been doing an incredible job, and we're looking to actually bring in some other ones as well.
Great. So there's a lot of advertising and marketing talk, right? Obviously today and yesterday and all week with the NRF. With all this success, so it's going to be a two-part question. So with all the success that you and the organization has had, I'm assuming you did some type of advertising, whether paid or not paid, it could be both. Where do you attribute a lot of the success from that strategy perspective? And then where are you going to be focusing in 2023, where you're going to invest, whether it's time, resources, to try to obviously continue the momentum?
Yes, so it's a great question. Again, I have to kind of answer it in two parts. The first part being the U.S. Open. The KPIs of the U.S. Open are quite easy to measure. It's ticket sales, hospitality, attendance, et cetera. We definitely have a strong marketing mix that we are kind of tweaking and always have a testing strategy around. We've seen actually great success in radio and podcast advertising. Out of home still does great for us for the U.S. Open because for the last 2 years, it opened up a little last year, but for the last 2 years, we really had to change the mix to kind of target people within the U.S. because of COVID, because we were bringing fans back and international travel was down. So we had to kind of tweak that. We don't really do a lot of print other than the New York Times, which is a partner of us. Digital and performance marketing, obviously huge. Social marketing for the U.S. Open and ticket sales also yields great success. On the community tennis side, that conversation's a little different, harder to measure. We measure that, believe it or not, by tennis ball sales. And a little bit of a PAC study, which is a study that goes out to talk about participation. So it's a combination of those both, because if I just measured it based on participation on the data that we're collecting, again, we really only are serving up USTA programming, which is just competitive play. It's really not capturing, play from a casual and social perspective. And in that, we do a lot of top of the funnel advertising. We launched Let's Tennis, which is a broad-based, it was a digital video and great assets that we, pushed out. We did a targeted buy a couple years ago that, has been maintained on regional television. And then we have 17 different sections, which are across the United States. And those sections are really the people connecting with the consumers and serving up the local play opportunities and that grassroots marketing, which is so important on getting people onto the courts.
Great. Thank you. All right, we're going to shift gears here. And I don't know if this is a good question or bad question. I haven't heard anyone ask about a competitor or not on any of the speaking engagements. But there is a lot of popularity growing with pickleball, right? I mean, and that was mostly due to COVID. I mean, even Tom Brady owns a pickleball team. Come on, like, is this an opportunity? Is this a threat to the USTA? Is it something you're embracing, not embracing? So what do you think about pickleball?
It's a hard question. Not only Tom Brady, but actually Naomi Osaka and Nick Kyrgios are also investors in pickleball. Well, first and foremost, I've played pickleball. It's fun. It makes way too much noise, as you probably read numerous articles about community boards that are having huge fights over it. tennis, we like to say, is a health and wellness organization, the United States Tennis Organization. And tennis really has so many benefits for mental and physical. And, any sport getting you outside and active, we are fans of. Pickleball being one. That being said, while we embrace people playing pickleball, what we are working on with pickleball and our local advocacy, sections is parks and recreation, because the challenge comes with the, foundation of what tennis needs, which is courts. Especially courts in public areas, because pickleball lines are different, obviously, than tennis lines. That being said, we do have a short court, which is our new entryway of introducing tennis to kids. And we're working with pickleball and with Parks and Rec to see if we could have blended lines. So it'll be a win-win for both public and the private sector. But the question is interesting because, like all marketers, I've been slightly obsessed with, ChatGPT. So I asked them to write me a commercial on the benefits of tennis, versus pickleball, promoting tennis. They gave me some interesting things. They talked about, that, tennis, there's more strategy, you need more skill, it's a harder sport. But then I didn't like all those answers. I actually asked it a harder question. I said, okay, now downplay pickleball. And funny enough, it came back and it schooled me. It said that as a AI that was truthful, and it does not recommend me downplaying any sport, because sport is good for everyone's health. And perhaps I should just tell them the benefits of tennis and support sport all around. Which was quite funny.
That's funny. I have a quick funny story about ChatGPT. So I've heard obviously a lot of folks use it for different examples, building a marketing plan, whatever. So the other day, I not only play tennis, I play a little pickleball, but I also play paddle, which is like platform tennis, if you've heard. It's like Northeast sport. Anyway, I've asked it for each one of those how to improve, my hit, my serve. And it's really funny. It gives you like step-by-step instructions, which I kind of knew the answers, but I wish like somehow it would like help me guide through like tossing the ball and the right thing. So anyway, there's so much potential to come from AI. All right, cool. What is the biggest, so all the success, there's definitely, some curveballs, but it sounds like hitting it out of the park with, with kind of like the changing of the guard of all the up and comers. Obviously, the adoption. What's been your biggest challenge since you've been at the USTA?
It's an interesting question. From a community tennis standpoint, it is working with the tennis ecosystem to kind of bring all of these smaller technology organizations that are out there. Things like Play My Court, or that's the one that's coming to top of mind, but building a kind of back-end database that is allowing these APIs to be kind of pulled into the USTA ecosystem, which is called, Serve Tennis, so we can understand more broadly, how the health of the game is in the sense of casual and competitive play. So A is working with the tennis ecosystem and all of these tennis partners and all of these facilities to kind of build trust, because as a national governing body, our only, goal is to grow tennis in America. It's not to steal customers. It's not to, convert them into our programs. So it's building that trust so, we could build an organization and a database that overall grows tennis in America and allows people to use this data, across that to do so.
Great. Last question before we open it up for questions. And speaking about back office and whatnot, what is your must-have MarTech or ad tech solutions? Like, what do you really rely on? Before you mention, hey, for when it comes to the U.S. Open, we get measured based on, hospitality, ticket sales, all that. So I'm assuming that kind of comes into into your whole entire configuration, what you have in the back office. Is there anything that you've implemented? Let's make it a little easier. Implemented over the last 5 years, where you're like, wow, that was the best decision I've ever made, and I rely on that tool every day.
That is also a very hard question. One of the best investments that we did was with our, database on the back end, because it was really the first time we were able to look at the U.S. Open fan base, ingest that information in from Ticketmaster. We work with an organization called Stella Largo, and also bring in to that information about the casual and competitive player that are coming in from our own programs, as well as these third-party vendors, and kind of seeing where both of these can overlap and kind of work to sell tickets, as well as programming, not only to support the U.S. Open, but also to support tournaments we don't own for ticketing, like Indian Wells, like the Miami Open, like we just sold Cincinnati. So just helping overall grow tennis, grow participation, grow our fan base, and get tennis back on the kind of zeitgeist, if you will, of people's minds.
Thanks, Amy. I think it's time to open up for questions. Awesome job.
Questions from the crew here? Yes. So I think name and where you're from first. Yeah, Andrew Sokolsky, Brand Innovators. I think I counted just now. I've been to 17 U.S. Opens, so I've experienced kind of the amazing magic you guys have in Flushing. Can you tell people who haven't been to other Grand Slams kind of like what makes the U.S. Open so special?
It's a great question. I would say, first and foremost, from a Grand Slam perspective, it's the last one. All of, the athletes have gone through an incredibly long road, to get to the U.S. Open. It's also on, a hard court. Which, from a playing surface, is definitely not a forgiving, way to play. But also, it's the biggest stadium. Arthur Ashe is a huge stadium, and being there, especially at night, with the subway in the background, with airplanes above you, with the roaring crowd, I mean, there's nothing like it. You say you've been there for multiple times. I've been going to the U.S. Open since I was 4. My parents were very kind to me. My father, had seats there. I come from a tennis family. I remember kind of the smell of the U.S. Open. I was going over the promenade when we parked in, the Shea Stadium at the time, and go Mets. And, there's really nothing like it, from, an entertainment standpoint as well. There's you could do much more than tennis. You could go out to a fancy meal. You could, get your, crepe or hot dog or, French fries for you, and sit and just kind of be with the crowd. For example, for the last Serena match, I probably could have been in the President's Suite. I actually was at the fountains, watching it with the crowd, and it was kind of magical. Just kind of the roar of people there, and the energy. There's really nothing like it. And, to what you said earlier, of, going for qualifying week or going for, as a grounds pass, getting up close and personal, and, kind of, that kind of taste of tennis is really quite amazing. Not to downplay, the other Grand Slams. Now more than ever, we're working more closely with them, and they each have a different taste. So please come out and check it out. I'm not going to be a commercial, but it is amazing.
Awesome. Dang it. I mean, my little guy, now, I was able to kind of like, I mean, admittedly, we live in Minnesota, so I was like, oh, yeah, maybe someday. But now I'm like, oh, shit. I really probably should take him because he's in love. And to your other point about the tennis ball sales, that's interesting to hear that that's one of the metrics. And I'd be curious if you saw any sort of bump around Christmas because, again, now my 9-year-old's obsessed and playing competitively. And everyone, aunts, uncles, you name it, sent him tennis balls. And in my head when I was, thinking, I'm like, okay, he couldn't have been happier, right? He was like, oh, I have tennis balls. I can do a new one every single one. And I was like, yeah, buddy, you can. So thank you. That's wonderful.
Amazing.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much. Huge round of applause for these two. Way to go.